Two grand tournaments fell under the thrall of the four-armed Emperor this weekend. Let's talk about some of the strongest Genestealer cult army lists in their 9th edition codex. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about some Genestealer cult lists. Two skilled players managed to win small GTs with them over the weekend, and I thought it would be good to use the examples to show off what the Genestealer cults can do at the moment. Despite releasing at the same time as the powerful Adeptus Custodes, the Genestealer cult do seem to be lagging a bit behind Custodes and Tau. Despite having some really quite powerful and even slightly game-breaking rules at times, the army is really quite fragile and the average stat lines of the models don't tend to get them by just by themselves, and I feel that they are kind of likely to stay with their previous stereotype, an army that's really good when played to the absolute best by one of the best players around, but despite some powerful rules, might be ones that the average generals tend to struggle with just a little bit more. I don't think it's the worst thing overall though. Kind of nice for Games Workshop to release a book with some solid and powerful rules, but not have it immediately dominating tournaments everywhere. In any case, let's take a look at a couple of their successful lists. First, Nick Nanavati's custom cult infantry swarm with 2 patriarchs, and then a twisted Helix melee list run by Inez Wilson. First up though, here's the custom cult infantry list that Nick Nanavati used to take down the melee at Shiloh GT. Obviously Nick Nanavati needs no introduction, he's one of the world's best 40k players, and he's released a whole load of content on the new Genestealer Cult Codex on the Art of War channel, which I'll link down in the video description. In any case, this list that he ran is a battalion and patrol detachment that allows there to be 2 patriarchs in the same army, and it's made up of quite a fun combination cult creed: Industrial Affinity to ignore any modifiers with industrial weapons, and Hunter's Instincts to allow you to re-roll charge rolls. Industrial Affinity works great on those heavy rock cutters, the ones that are -1 to hit but damage 3, good to have those without the downside, and pretty nice for moving and shooting with things like seismic cannons. Hunter's Instincts is always going to be pretty efficient on a Genestealer cult army. Re-rolling charges is great on all those 8-inch charges that they can get out of Deep Strike. It means that your units are usually going to get into combat 2 out of every 3 times. Good that that's not going to be sucking up your command re-rolls, though I guess it's a bit of a trade-off between taking the Industrial Affinity or the rest of the cult of the Four-Armed Emperor creed, which this one basically comes from. That one does have a few other useful things, but getting a whole load of direct damage really helps out certain important units. As mentioned, the list is led by 2 different patriarchs, nice melee monsters with some psychic. The first one takes Mass Hypnosis and Mental Onslaught, Mass Hypnosis being probably one of the best powers in the whole book. It makes enemy units fight last and are also -1 attack as well, so you can be super safe when you're charging. A familiar allows a cast to be re-rolled, and he takes Prowling Adjutant and the Unwilling Orb. Prowling Adjutant is the one that allows you to move before you're charged, so it's going to be pretty resilient in combat, and the Unwilling Orb gives you extra psychic defense, an extra denial, and your denials can target any spell on the board, which is pretty unsettling for certain armies. +1 to cast the Mental Onslaught Witchfire doesn't hurt either. The other one takes the movement buff of the Psychic Stimulus, Might from Beyond for +1 attack on a unit, and again a familiar. That familiar is upgraded to the Crouchling for some more reliable psychic casts, and this one also takes the Biomorph adaptation, +1 attacks and toughness, making him a generally stronger patriarch in melee. There's then an Acolyte Icon Ward with Alien Majesty for some nice shenanigans regenerating cult units, and he can also make those charges even more reliable due to his Sacred Cult Banner action, giving you a +1 to charge with most of your key units, so any of the core units within range of him will be charging on a 7 inches re-rolling rather than an 8. Very reliable there, and something like an 80+% chance to get in. Finally, for some extra handy buffs to the formation, there's a Primus. He can hand out 2 different sets of re-roll 1s to your most important units, and also lend a bit of a hand in melee as well if he needs to. Moving on to the infantry next. Some of the biggest damage dealers in the list are 2 big squads of Acolytes, generally good melee troops in themselves with Obsec, but also taking those 4 heavy rock cutters means they should be able to threaten the heaviest units. Hitting on 3s and getting 3 damage is really quite a nice combo. One takes the charge boost out of Deep Strike, a trap sprung for 3d6 drop the lowest for yet more charge reliability even if they're not in Icon Ward range, and the other one gets the Our Time is Nigh benefit for +1 attacks on the first fight phase. An extra 4 of those excellent rock cutter attacks for 10 points really isn't too bad at all. There's then 2 smaller units of Acolytes. One of them's upgraded with Excavate for 20 points, that allows you to ruin 1 piece of terrain in the enemy's deployment zone, which is quite nice, and the other one has a demo charge and it takes the Lying in Wait ability. That's the one where you can set up within 3 inches of enemy models. It might allow you to sneak onto an objective that your opponent wouldn't be expecting, maybe throw a demo charge as a surprise target, or just be able to use them to do an action in a unit that's almost going to be impossible to screen due to how close it can set up. There's then a unit of 5 acolytes, again most likely for actions and objectives, and then 4 big units of neophytes with seismic cannons, good troops just to be popping up on objectives in general, but those seismic cannons are really quite efficient damage dealers, and being able to move and shoot them with industrial infinity really is very good indeed. It makes them far more usable and a little bit less dependent on getting crossfire markers off. Finally, for a bit of infantry blending, there's 2 units of 10 pure strain Genestealers. One of them takes the They Came From Below upgrade. That's pretty much an auto-include on 1 unit of pure strains. It's the one that gets you a pre-game move of 9 inches after you've flipped an ambush marker, netting you a pretty much guaranteed first turn charge. Or if your opponent goes first and they've got units threatening to kill them, then you could just put them back into Deep Strike Reserve. Finally, for bikes and vehicles, there's 3 units of 4 Atalan Jackals, really nice cheap little screening units with a pre-game move, 1 Goliath truck that could either hold some neophytes or acolytes, and 1 unit of 2 Achilles Ridge Runners with heavy mining lasers. They take the From Every Angle upgrade, the one that allows them to use Strategic Reserve on the first turn, pretty much guaranteeing them the Alpha Strike and a good line of sight. Could be a good unit to help you get crossfire exposed. Overall, looks like a fun if fairly complex list to play. I think it's really quite fun the way that it's managed to use over half the proficient planning table here. Those abilities are a ton of fun, and also let you do some seriously powerful moves. Certainly looks like it's destructive enough to threaten just about anything in the game, and with loads of multiple small units with objectives secured, it's going to be very good for playing the objectives, and it's going to be hard to stop things like engage on all fronts or retrieve Nachman data. Certainly doesn't hurt that it was played by one of the most well-known 40k tournament players in the world as well. Moving on to the second list though, and this one maybe seems a little bit more typical of the Genestealer cult lists that have been placing quite highly. Twisted Helix is just really popular. The strength boost makes a lot of units strength 5, a really nice break point that makes them a lot more efficient against plenty of units. Getting a bit more mobility on the board isn't bad, and the mini transhuman thing that they have going on where they can't be wounded on 2s, that's helpful when it comes up. This list was run by Innes Wilson, another top tier tournament player, who used it to take first at the Voidhammer GT in Scotland, and another victory for the 4-armed Emperor. From a quick Google search, I did notice that he has recently written a Goonhammer article going over a very similar list to this in detail, so I'll post that as a link down below in the video description. In any case, this Twisted Helix list is a very melee heavy one, and it's also very character heavy as well, using over half the Genestealer cult character roster. It's all crammed in a single battalion, and it makes very good use of the Genestealer cult rule that allows them to take an extra character per HQ slot character. So it means that 3 out of this big roster are completely slotless, allowing them to all be in one detachment and save CP. In any case, for the leaders of the cult and their hangers-on, first up there's a Patriarch with Mass Hypnosis, Might from Beyond and Mutagenic Deviation. Mutagenic Deviation being the Twisted Helix one that all their psychers know. That's the one that allows 6s to hit to auto-wound the enemy, particularly good on big squads of pure strains or hybrids. Mass Hypnosis and Might from Beyond are both excellent powers for buffing up troops, and he also takes the Twisted Helix Warlord trait as well, Bioalchemist, for +1 damage on those rending claws of his, meaning he's an absolute blender that'll go through 3 wound infantry and most other things really efficiently. Next up there's a Magus with Mutagenic Deviation, Psychic Stimulus, Mass Hypnosis and a Familiar. Psychic Stimulus is the one that allows you to advance and charge or fall back and charge. Pretty handy for some of the Acolyte units, which actually really have quite a long threat range with that, particularly with the Twisted Helix bonus to movement. Again he takes the Unwilling Orb, again very handy for denying multiple powers and casting Mass Hypnosis reliably. Otherwise there's a very similar Acolyte Icon Ward with Alien Majesty for a big aura of +1 to charge when he needs it. A Primus who takes Focus of Adoration, that allows nearby cult units to heroic intervene, which are usable on the pure strain Genestealers as well, so quite nice in defense. He also takes Exacting Planner too, which allows him to use his reroll ones to wound thing 1 additional time, and also on the turn that he does so, he can use those on non-core units, so things like pure strain as well. Another way to get extra damage out of a really big squad of them. There's then the enormously scary assassin threat that is the Kellamorph with the Wormtooth rounds. The pistol-wielding assassin can either use the Liberator auto-stobs for gunning down an enemy character, counting them as crossfire exposed with his Perfect Ambush rule, or he can just throw some pretty decent damage into any enemy unit. Those Wormtooth rounds are really vicious, with strength 6, high AP and damage 3. Rounding up the characters, there's an Assassin Sanctus with a sniper rifle, potentially quite a good one for putting crossfire markers around if you need one, and it can cause some massive disruption to enemy characters as well, causing them to. It's got a stratagem that can cause them to lose aura abilities or suffer perils of the warp if they take any wounds. Finally, there's a Nexos with a cranial inlay. He could be used to broadcast the Primus buffs across the battlefield. give one unit a crossfire marker that needs one, but is also just pretty useful for command point farming, certainly helpful for an army like Genestealer cults with lots of decent stratagems. Moving on into the actual units, first up there's 5 squads of Acolyte hybrids in the troops section, 3 units of 10 and 3 units of 5. One of the 10-man blobs is a handflamer one, they take from every angle, the one that allows them first turn strategic reserve to pop up and tow something with those 10 handflamers. Then there's 2 units of 10 that each take 4 heavy rock drills. Heavy rock drills are probably my favourite of the mining weapons in normal circumstances. A slightly weird profile that deals out 2 mortal wounds on 6s to hit, and also any hits auto wound the enemy, though they're only damage 1. I feel like they're usually going to be the best choice against quite a lot of targets. Mortal wounds and damage 1 attacks don't care about certain things like -1 damage. In any case, out of those squads, one of them takes Our Time is Nigh. That's the +1 attack in the first round of combat, and I'm going to guess that they might be deployed in the Goliath trucks. Out of the 3 smaller units, 2 of them are decked out with handflamers and 1 are just bare bones. I feel like again they'd be very good for small skirmishing units, good for actions, objectives and bullying enemy light infantry. Then we've got some of the really big hitters of the list, a big unit of 14 metamorph hybrids with 1 Colt Lash Whip. They'll be putting out a crazy amount of high AP strength 6 attacks, very few things that want to get hit by that, and they have the Attrap Sprung one, the one that allows them a 3d6 drop the lowest charge. Finally there's 3 units of Pure Strain, 1 unit of 10, 1 of 9 and 1 of 5. The unit of 10 takes that fairly standard they came from below one, the one for a potential first turn charge or going back into reserve. Finally for bikes and vehicles there's just 2 units of 4 Atalan Jackals this time. This time they each take some demo charges in addition to their regular kit, good for screening and potentially getting crossfire on units, and then 2 Goliath trucks, one of which takes a cache of demolition charges, both good for a little bit of damage up close, and also auto-exploding if you need to. It's quite good fun to see 2 relatively different Genestealer cult lists, the first one going in quite heavily on crossfire, this one sticking to a lot more of the powerful melee and strong characters. I must admit it really does look like a blast to play this one. So many units that are just going to cause a massive mess when they get into combat, and a bunch of fun characters with some powerful buffing abilities, and that crazy Kellamorph that just jumps in and does some massive damage. Like all Genestealer cult lists, it's certainly going to need to be played with carefully. Most of the army is really quite fragile if it's out in the open. It's going to be important to coordinate things well, use terrain wherever possible, and really make the charges count when you get them off. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed a quick look at some of the most powerful Genestealer cult lists around. If you've got any further insights as to how they were played, or any other particular units or combos that have been working out well for you, I look forward to hearing about it down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll hopefully get a few more Genestealer cult videos out over the next month or so. Looking forward to doing a few general videos, maybe a tier list and some discussion on starting the army. Finally, if you'd like to help support Auspex Tactics and help keep these videos coming so regularly, I would just like to mention one way in which you can do so, potentially at no additional cost if you live in the UK. If you were thinking about ordering in any models from somewhere at some point, I'd just like to mention that I do have an Element Games affiliate link down in the video description, a discount retailer that usually give 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures. If you were thinking about ordering in some Warhammer, if you click on the link before ordering something, a small amount goes to help support Auspex Tactics without costing you any more whatsoever. Can just be something to consider if you would like to help out. For people over in the USA, I do also have an Amazon link down there as well. That one works very similarly indeed. Click the link, order literally anything whatsoever from Amazon, and a small amount goes to help support the channel without costing you any more when you buy. Again, can just be something to use if you were picking up something anyway. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.